Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hutchins. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Association of Nonprofits, and this is MANP Connects. This is our Friday morning coffee chat that we started during the lockdown of March and April 2020 in order to bring fast information to our members across the state of Maine. And we discovered that people really like it. We get a lot of you Zooming and calling in on a regular basis. And now instead of once a week, we have dialed back to once a month. And we try to bring you the news and trends, and also just the sheer connection and sense of community with regards to Maine's nonprofit sector, and recognizing that there are people just like you across this state who sometimes feel a little bit out of whack, just basically because maybe you're new to your role, or because you haven't been in Maine for very long. All different kinds of things it might be helpful to know you're part of a community. And of course, because we are still living in a time of adaptive change, meaning that instead of the types of changes where we know exactly what we're going to do, technical change like the on-off switch, like do we want it on, do we want it off? Adaptive change is much more vague. It's much more shades of gray. And if there's anything that I have tried to identify and cope with, is that even to today, we are living in a sea of adaptive change. There's just so much going on because the year of 2020 really had a lot of experiences that impacted so many of us and many of the people for whom we serve. And we've been trying to figure it out ever since. So MANP has your back. We're here, and MANP Connects is one way for us to just build that community and build that connection. So I'm glad you're all here. Before we get started officially with our first guest, who is going to be Laura, I'm going to introduce her in just a second. But I just want to say officially, please continue as you sign in to identify yourselves in chat. Feel free to chat back and forth to people in the chat box. If you see friends from afar or people that do similar work to you, we really want this to be a place of connection. And I want to thank our sponsors. Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare has been a tremendous support for not just the Maine Association of Nonprofits, but as a nonprofit themselves, and knowing their role in the community, they are very, very supportive of many nonprofits across this state, and they're just a darn tootin' great group of people. So, and that's one of my favorite things about this job, is working with people who really authentically show up to their jobs every day and live true into their values. So thank you, Harvard Pilgrim, for all you do for all of us. Okay, I'm going to get started because we don't have a lot of time, and I've got 4 great new leaders who I want to introduce you to. So I'm going to start with Laragh Kavanaugh. She's with Ketcha Outdoors. Good morning,
Hi.
Laura.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I feel like I've already met people because Kelly, who produces the program for us, she helps me invite people, and she was so enthusiastic about having you on. And so seeing you, I'm actually meeting you for the first time. So
great,
thanks for being here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to dive right in because as I said with MANP Connects, we try to keep these short and sweet just so people can get on throughout their day. But I would just love to learn a little bit about you and how you came to this role, and what you're passionate about. Why Ketcha Outdoors?
Great. Yeah. So I grew up in Maine. I live in South Portland now. I traveled all the way to Arizona to go to an outdoor environmental ed leadership college. And then I worked in outdoor leadership and led wilderness trips around the US, and also led international programs to Ghana and India, and just love working with youth and love being in the outdoors. Then I moved back to Maine and got a job at CIEE, which is a study abroad international nonprofit, but a large nonprofit. And I kind of rose through the ranks there and developed a lot of my more administrative skills, and it's a large nonprofit, so a little more of a corporate environment. But I just love leading teams and learning more about kind of operations. And I worked there for 15 years. And then I decided during the pandemic that it was time to kind of focus more on my home community and be and help people in Southern Maine. And I saw the Catch Outdoors job posting and really felt like, wow, this would bring a lot of my skills and passions together and help me be closer to home.
Oh, great. Yeah, I love hearing stories like that. It was very similar to my own, where I went out and did the thing when I was earlier, and then I came back to Maine, and I thought I spent some time in Washington, D.C., and I love Washington, but I was talking to my boss, and she literally said to me, you know, Jen, what your trouble is, you have too many principles. And I thought, that's intriguing.
Huh.
At the end of the day, I feel like that's all I have. So I think maybe I might be in the wrong place. She was a lobbyist, and it was like, oh, wow. Like, I'm not sure DC really wants to fix the problems, because then all the lobbyists would not have any, that was a very 23-year-old naive, right? But coming back to Maine, it really felt like, oh, okay, I can genuinely make a difference when you have a state of 1.3 million people, right? It's like, you can really connect. So being an executive director, you've got a lot of executive directors on the call today. What's been like your biggest surprise, or what are you learning that you're like, huh, who knew?
Yeah, so in my last job, I was a leader of a team of about 60 people just in my department, and I worked with 50 countries all around the world organizing programs, and I thought I was busy and I thought I wore a lot of hats. And now that I'm running a Ketcha Outdoors, which also has the Portland Gear Hub as part of our organization, I never knew what wearing so many hats actually felt like. So I do marketing and fundraising and business development and strategy, and then I fix photocopiers and clean the bathroom and go to people's houses and unload free furniture so we don't have to buy desks. So like the array of responsibilities is just infinite. And I actually love that. I feel like I'm kind of a Jill of all trades in my life anyway. So now I just live that every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody, if you feel like it, raise your hand in chat or on your screen, if you know exactly what Laura's talking about. There's no doubt about it that's exactly one of the things we talk about at our Leadership Institute for Executive Directors is that very thing, that the role of executive director can be such a wide range of, all the way down to the minutia, all the way big to the big picture thinking. And that was one of the things I said to people with the pandemic was the pandemic really, where were you during the lockdown? Were you working at CIE?
I was at CIE working from home in my basement.
Yeah. And so I'm sure you know what I mean. It's just that idea that when we went into lockdown, there wasn't anything on the plate, like anything that I could think of that either wasn't going to have to change immediately or we wanted to change eventually. And it was just, that's what I mean by the sea of adaptive change. It's like, there's so many things as an executive director that you need to be thinking about and sometimes be the person to do. And it requires a lot of deftness. So we're lucky to have you back in Maine, Laura.
Yeah, and I would also add that I remember thinking, wow, I've been at this nonprofit for so long and I was pretty scared to leave. And I had friends and I felt like I knew my job and I knew what to do and I was really skilled at it. And then it took me a while to be brave enough to make the change. And now I am with equally passionate people who are so inspiring to me every day, my colleagues, and I'm being challenged and learning new things. So I guess it's also just a plug to say, like, it is good to stretch and there's always more to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now in terms of Ketcha, what would you say is your biggest challenge? We call them bricks in our brick backpack here at MANP sometimes, but maybe that's not a good analogy for you. But what would you say is the biggest issue impacting outdoor education and organizations like Ketcha?
Well, I think outdoor education is pretty popular, especially after the pandemic or during the pandemic. So, but I think, and I'm noticing we are getting more applicants to open jobs. So it's not as bad as it was maybe even a year ago. But cost of living has really gone up in Portland and in the surrounding towns, and staff want to be paid more, and I want to pay people fair and a livable wage. I'm struggling to find the balance with keeping program costs reasonable for families and accessible for people, while also, covering all of our expenses and, giving people raises who really deserve it and really work hard.
Laura, I can tell you that is absolutely, I was meeting with my finance committee yesterday and they asked me, we are on a calendar year fiscal budget, and they asked me what, sort of a prelude to what I thought 2024 would bring. And that was exactly the issue that I raised with them, was the balance of wanting, very much being committed to equity and wanting to think about increasing our livable wage, and how we evaluate, or how do we even evaluate what a livable wage is, and what is an equitable pay range, and all of that. And I said, in order to live into those values, given the external pressures of all the other things going on, inflation, but then our revenue models not catching up, is our number one challenge, and will be the most impactful thing for our budget. So I can definitely relate to that, and that's really useful. So before I say goodbye, I can't believe I have to, it's already, because I would love to talk to you more. First of all, Ghana, I've been to Ghana, actually. I love Ghana. It's a beautiful, beautiful country. That's really cool. So I hope I get a chance to meet with you again soon. Do you have do you have a book or anything you're reading, anything cultural?
Well, coincidentally, my book club is reading MANP, which is written by Jessica George, who's from Ghana. And it's a book about a Ghanaian woman living in the US and kind of navigating those cultural differences between how she was raised and the culture she lives in now.
Oh, very cool.
I would highly recommend it.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Laura. I'm going to get on
thanks for
my
having
next.
me.
Yeah. Okay. Bye. Hi, Kara. You're up next. How are you?
Hi. Great. Thank you. Thanks for having
You're welcome. Kara's from the, oh my gosh, I don't want to say it wrong. Tell me.
Maine State Breastfeeding Coalition.
Okay. Okay, good. Anyway, I'm not going to go there. Everybody, Kara and I know each other from another context. So if it seems like I'm not being very formal in introducing her, it's just, anyway, good morning. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much.
So tell us a little bit about how you got to your role at the Breastfeeding Coalition.
Sure. So I also grew up in Maine, and I went to UMaine Farmington for a degree in psychology, UMaine Oronde for a degree in human development. And I've always been fascinated in pregnancy, birth, and infant development. And that led me to become a board certified lactation consultant. I did my training when I was in San Francisco about 15 years ago. I taught prenatal classes and did my lactation clinical hours at a hospital there. And I also worked as a postpartum doula. And when I moved back to Maine in 2009, I started working at Maine Medical Center as a lactation consultant, and soon transitioned into a program manager role there. And I became involved with the Maine State Breastfeeding Coalition in 2014 when they happened to be in a redesign phase. They had been in existence as a task force since the 1990s. And in 2013, received some funding from the Maine Health Access Foundation to redesign the operational structure. So it was a great time to get involved, and thanks to MIHAF for funding to help make that all happen. So at that time, we were just getting started and decided in 2017 to become a nonprofit. And thanks to the amazing resources and support of MANP, we knew how to go about that process. We leaned heavily on MANP and the United States Breastfeeding Committee and other coalitions around the country for guidance in that process. So in 2018, we became an official 501c3 and we elected our first board of directors, of which I became the president. So I've been involved with the organization for that amount of time. We've been busy in the past years, growing and fundraising and building our board of directors and navigating COVID. And in 2021, we finally completed our first strategic plan. And that plan included hiring an executive director within a year or so. So I've been fortunate to have the ability to volunteer my time as a board president over the last 5 years. But I knew it wasn't a sustainable structure for me or for the organization. So we finally got to a place where we could create a position, and I was pleased that the board decided to offer that to me.
That's
So
great, Kara. We see that path very commonly in Maine as communities come together and they decide that there's something out there they want to do something about and improve and expand access, and however that's defined. And so how new are you to this paid role? I know being president probably, in some ways it feels very similar.
So far, it does feel pretty similar. It's been less than 3 months since I've been in the official part-time executive director role.
Right. So what are is there any surprises that have come across your desk? And again, you are not alone. There are many people we know in Maine who've gone through this exact transition. So just curious.
It's still pretty new. I think that, the rest of the board and I understand that we're going to learn a lot over the next 6 to 12 months, and good communication is going to be key. We're going to be learning a lot about how to balance board responsibilities and my responsibilities, and when is it something that I should be doing? When is it something they should be doing? How should we be coordinating all of that? And I know that there are fantastic resources to lean on, and I would be happy to take any advice on all of that.
Well, I will say one of the things that I did when I came to MANP 7 years ago is I recruited some people that I knew who were executive directors and started my own little peer group, and not friends. I mean, some of the people I knew better than others, but more just because of their position as executive directors. And at the same time, I very distinctly wanted them to represent different missions. It was really focused on the role, not on the content of what we did. And I found that peer group, it's continued through the 7 years, and it's been so helpful. So do you have anything like that?
Informally, I would love something formal like that. But I have had a number of conversations over the years. This has been a goal to get to this point. And so I've had a number of conversations with different executive directors from Maine to Kansas to California in similar breastfeeding leadership capacities.
Yeah.
And they've given some great advice. I think that, one person suggested that a nonprofit consultant, which makes sense that this was her suggestion, that we don't hire an executive director until we have 3 years worth of salary and everything ready to go in the bank. Another person said, why don't you start with some smaller projects, get some smaller grants to help cover some of those salary costs and grow from there. And then another person who I admire greatly, a fantastic leader in the state of Maine, she said, you know what, you and your board have the opportunity to do whatever you want. Just be brave and make it up and go from there. And that's, we've kind of done a combination of all of that. But that is advice that I keep coming back to, that we can do what we want to do as long as we have to have a plan, of course, and we have to reevaluate, and there's some strategy around all of that. But I feel really, really grateful for that encouragement.
Yeah, that's tremendous, Kara. What's most meaningful to me, in hearing what you're saying, I mean, that can be in the world that we swim in nonprofits, the advice can range, right? For everything from fly by the seat of your pants to make sure you have a 3 to 5 year plan before you take a step forward, right? It really is that range. And so being able to, and the trick is really more around the communication and the strategy, and really having a good sense of living into your collaborative expectations of a team. And so I'm admire, because you clearly have put a lot of thought into it. And so that's great. There is a question from Amanda about MANP having peer group communities. I will mention that we have a leadership, I'd mentioned already with Laragh that we have a leadership institute for executive directors. And that is something that we do. It begins in September. It's a multi-month experience where it's between 18 and 22 executive directors who go through a series of workshops and retreats with one another. It's like a September to May commitment. We just graduated our last cohort. So if you have questions about that, I'm going to be out on a limb, and Kelly already put the link in chat, but we also have our director of education, Katrina Ruffner, is on the call today. And so look at that. She read my mind. She already put her email in chat. She's like, oh, great. She wants me to put my email in chat. Thank you, Katrina. So Kara, in terms of the Breastfeeding Coalition, what's your priority right now?
So we are reevaluating our strategic plan this summer and looking at what our true capacity is. We're continuing to bring folks on to our board and continuing to grow that and grow the skill set. If anyone's interested, please let me know.
Do you know about our Board Explorer?
I do. Yes, we have started that process of looking.
Okay, great.
It's such a great resource. Thank you.
Yeah.
And grant writing and fundraising and all of those basic foundational necessities that we are going to be focusing on at this point.
Great. And what do you think about the access to, like in terms of what your priorities are and for the community, are things getting better out there for people who need access to appropriate breastfeeding support?
I think so. There's definitely potential still. There's a lot of work to still be done. And we're doing that through educational opportunities and networking opportunities, connection and advocacy. And I don't know if you've all heard, but paid leave in the state of Maine, LD 1964, passed through the Senate and the House this week. And the next steps are for it to get funded in appropriations and get signed by the governor. And that will be hugely helpful for new families in particular, to have more time with their babies, to establish breastfeeding, and to also be able to pay their bills. So really excited about that.
That's great. It's been quite the legislature this year. And for any of you who are curious, Mary Alice Scott is our public affairs manager, and she and I were both in Augusta and DC these past few weeks. And she's a great person to know if you're interested in learning more about MANP's advocacy programs. She is also a new mom herself, and so she's been helping us stay on top of that particular issue. So that's great. We also got to try out, Kara, the breastfeeding room, whether or not they had pumping rooms at the state capitol and the US Capitol. So if anybody needs the information about where one can quietly use the pumping rooms in either location, Augusta or Washington, DC, at the state capitol or the congressional capitol, the US Capitol, Mary Alice is in the know. She can tell you all the details.
Yeah. We're also working on a workplace support initiative. So toolkits for people going back to work and for employers who have employees coming back to work who are lactating and want to meet their breastfeeding goals. So those are coming this fall and in the next year. And that's going to be
that's really exciting, Kara, because that's one of those things that really helps organizations meet their diversity and inclusion goals with regards to making sure that you're supporting your employees and making doing what you can to support them in their unique circumstances in terms of being able to be productive at work. So thank you. That's really helpful. We'll make sure we stay on top of that. Is there anything that you're reading or watching or excited about listening to soon that you'd be willing to share with the group?
Yeah, I just started reading this book called Ikigai. The Japanese Secret to a Long and Happy Life. And the author interviewed elderly people in Okinawa, Japan, and they found that what they all had in common is something called ikigai, or something worth living for. And the concept is being able to combine 4 different categories: what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. And I've just started it, but I feel pretty good that I've found my ikigai.
Oh, excellent. Wow.
Yeah.
That's inspiring. Thank you so much. Kelly has put a link in that in the chat around that.
Awesome.
And thanks, Kara. I really appreciate you being here today. And thanks for stepping up to the plate and being willing to stretch yourself a little bit and take on the executive director role. It is a challenge, but I just want to reassure you again that there are people like you across this state. And if you ever want to be connected to people, MANP is here, and we can help you with that. So
Thank you so much.
thank you, Kara. Okay, so I think my next guest is Oronde Cruger from Speak About It. Are you out there, Oronde?
Here I am.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm really, really good. I already knew Kara. I was meeting Laragh for the first time, but very similar to Laragh, I feel like I already know you because Kelly, my partner in crime here, is just so excited about having all 4 of you on today. I feel like I already know you in some regard. I did see you at the State House. You joined us at the State House. Yeah, good.
Yes, that was such a lovely event. Yeah. And thank you all. Just you're generally so supportive and so enthusiastic about the work that we're all doing. And it feels really nice. So thank you for all that energy.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad that it's received in a way that is filling for you, and that really does feel to me like the benefit of my work is meeting people like Laragh and Kara and yourself, who so clearly are motivated by human connection, as opposed to some of the other values or priorities that get put out by our society. So any way that we can support and lift that up feels like my life work. So I'm really privileged to be able to do that. Tell us a little bit about how you got to your role and what you're passionate about.
Heard. Okay. It's been a long journey. It's weird. I've realized that I've been involved with Speak About It in one form or another right since the beginning, which has been almost like half my life. I started with Speak About It when it started at Bowdoin in about 2009. I was one of the students. I did a residential life, and I was a proctor. So I was living with the first year students and trying to think about just like the college experience and how we can help freshmen have happier, healthier lives on campus. And we were like, there's so much conversation about how sex can go wrong, right? About STIs and about assault, and all that's really important. But there's also like a happy, fun, empowering part of sex and relationships. And that was so much of what we wanted to like really bring to folks. And so as a student, I was a part of a group that helped to kind of get that going at Bowdoin. And then our founding executive director, Shane, was like, hey, I feel like I want to do this for the world. I want to like keep doing this. And so when he graduated, he kind of made it an official nonprofit. And so then when I graduated, he pulled me into it, and I went from being, that student advisor to being one of the actor educators in the show, to then we decided we wanted more programs. So I started writing new programs for us. So I became program coordinator, and then program manager and director, and now executive director. So it's been a wild ride, and I've seen the organization from so many different angles. And I think, the last part was, what do I love about it? I think what I really love, and I was thinking about this because it's changed over the years, but I think the thing that I really love is these are skills that are so important across your life, right? Like being able to like look inside and say, what do I want versus what do I need? Why are those things different? How do I like be honest with myself about those things? And how do I be honest with someone else? And how do we find common ground and being able to like respect ourselves and each other together in this interaction? That's not just sex and intimacy, that's friendships, that's your family, that's working relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that this organization has made me, frankly, just a better person, like across the board, because I'm so afraid of being a hypocrite. So I try to like take the lessons that we say. And I feel like I've seen it with other people, that it's like really helped them to learn a lot of things about their own lives.
Yeah, Oronde, I love that. And I'm going to ask you a selfish question because I have a daughter who's going to be a first year student in college. And so I'm having these conversations with her right now. But one thing is, what did you major in at Bowdoin?
Yeah, and so I was a neuroscience major, and so I like
Okay.
my focus was hormones and behavior and learning and memory. And so for a while, I was like, how did I end up doing speak about it? Then someone's like, actually, that makes a lot of sense because I'm
Right.
writing curricula about how people behave in these interpersonal relationships. So
Right. And what I love of it's really what you're talking about is very much present for me right now, because that's exactly what I was talking to my daughter about her relationship. And you know, she's looking at me, this 18-year-old girl who's in a relationship, she's looking at me with wide eyes, like she trusts me, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't necessarily know. I did not know when I went to college what the heck I was doing, right? And so how do I counsel my daughter at the same stage in her life, but in a way that's, I just said this to her yesterday. I said, she said, because she's in a relationship, and she said, do you think I should break up before we go to and I said, here's the bottom line, my dear. What I wish for you is that you can find that honest place in yourself.
Yes.
And allow that to come out. And I said, the challenge is, I have no idea how you do that because I'm still trying to figure that out myself. So I'm just really grateful for Speak About It. And that a quick question. How do people get access to your organization's resources? If there are people on this call who are like, oh, this is really interesting for myself or people in the community, how does that work?
Yeah, and so two things. So I guess I'll answer this question first. And so you can reach out on our website. There's like a little form that you can like fill out and be like, hey, I want more information, or I want to I want to collaborate in some way. I love, because I write all of our curricula, like I really love when there's a new thing for me to work on. So like, please don't hesitate to be like, hey, I love these programs, but I would love it to be like tweaked in this way. We're also pretty active on social media. So if that's like more your speed, you can reach out there. And I technically check my email, but I don't love the sense of like urgency that email culture creates. And so I would definitely say like reach out on the website or through social media. But I will respond to my email, and that's oronde@wespeakaboutit.org.
Oh, thank you, Oronde. I'm really glad you said that too, because guess what? This issue is going to be around a long time, if not forever. And so we have to remember that we can slow down a little bit, and we'll all get there, right?
Well, it's so interesting because I think that there's, for all of us, I'm sure that we share this trait, is that like we want to do good, and it's so easy to like pour yourself into it, especially when like there's limited resources for nonprofits, you know, and so we like pour ourselves in, and it's like the entirety of our existence, and then all of a sudden you realize that you've like poured everything out of your cup and there's nothing left. And it's like, as a person who has like a naturally kind of caretakery personality, I've been trying really hard over the past bunch of years to like realize that it's okay to like have some energy left for myself, that like we can reclaim selfish, right? You can't be selfish all the time, but you have to be at least a little selfish. And so things that force me to be urgent when I like don't need to be urgent, like bring back all of that past stuff. And so I'm trying to like stray away. Oh yes, and our operations manager Alex just put in the chat that they are far better at email. And so they're Alex K at wespeakaboutit.org.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Is it takes a team. It always, I mean, that's the thing about our work in the nonprofit sector is, of course, it takes a village, everybody. You know, stop feeling like we have to do everything ourselves. So that's great. It's really, really cool. I'm going to talk a minute because you have, we talk a lot at MANP about leadership succession and being mindful of, assuming you want your mission to stay working in the community, you want to be mindful of where the person behind you is going to be coming up from, and you clearly have done that. Is there anything about being the executive director role that has been surprising to you or different? I mean, you know the organization really well, so maybe not, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, and here I'm gonna take a step back because like there's something that you said about your conversation with your daughter. Is it okay for me to take a step back?
Oh, please. Yeah.
Yeah, is that I love that you mentioned about like finding that place of truth. And I was like trying to make sure I got back to that. I think that is the advice. And I think that like we talk to our educators sometimes about being confidently unsure. And I think that's such an important skill to have, like when you have any type of leadership power. And I think that young people frequently believe that like there's like a secret handbook with all the answers. And so I think letting them know that like being confidently unsure, that it's okay, that you can say like, hey, I'm still working on this thing, and that's part of why I want you to start working on it earlier, and like giving those like almost those like vague parameters of like, this is what that'll feel like, right? Like this is what it's like to like live your truth and find that within yourself is, I think, really important, because the specific landmarks aren't going to be right for everyone, but those overarching themes are so huge, and letting them know that like finding a place of truth within yourself is like what you need, you know. So love that. I just want to make sure that I like applaud you for that. So you did a great job.
Well, thank you. And everybody's in chat is really responding to this phrase, confidently unsure. And it really, I think it takes the next step in this idea that if there, you know, silver linings from 2020, but it seems like the people that I talk to are becoming more comfortable with this idea of paradox, that there is a both and, right? That it's not, we very seldom live in a really clear black and white, like this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing, this is a yes, this is a no. It's more often a paradox. And so being able to say a paradox and I'm confidently unsure. So
yes,
I appreciate you furthering that. I think a lot of us are gonna carry forward with that. So thank you so much.
Of course, good. And then real fast, your other question. So I think, yeah, like I have been really familiar with the organization in a number of ways. And so I think that it doesn't feel drastically different. And, you know, like Olivia and I, our outgoing executive director, we did a lot of like co-leadership. I would say the biggest thing that felt different, or that was like, that's been surprising, is there's a way in which it can be a surprisingly isolated or isolating position, right? Like I try really hard to be like really open and like really honest about things that are happening and how I feel and like what our reasonings are behind certain things. But then I also have to realize that like there's some moments that like it just might not be helpful or appropriate for people to have like all of the information. Like, and so I think, so for example, with something, I think one of the prep questions that you mentioned is like, what's something we're struggling with right now? We do a lot of work with colleges and universities, and technically everyone we work with, they're the people responsible for big emotions on campus, right? And big things that might come up for students. And so they were doing that during the pandemic, dealing with everyone's huge emotions, and all of them are burnt out and quit. And so we had a bunch of schools that like just didn't pay us from the work we did last year. So as of this past March, we were owed like $40,000 from the previous August. And so that created like kind of a financial crisis for us, you know? And so trying to figure out like, how much do I tell the staff about that, right? Like when they're asking if we can like pay a little bit extra for like training for X, Y, or Z thing. And I'm like, ooh, we can't, you know, and we normally say yes to those types of things. Like, how do I explain that to them, you know, in a way that like doesn't terrify them, but also like gives them information because they deserve the information, you know? And so it ends up becoming this position where like, it does feel like surprisingly isolated, because you're just like, you're the keeper of all the information and having to figure out, how do I give that to people, you know?
Yeah. And I know that I can tell already, Oronde, that you're so intentional in how you communicate and relate to people that I bet confidently unsure was get you to the right place. So I'm so excited to meet you. I'm not going to get to all the questions because as usual, I get sucked into having great conversations, but I want to make sure I have time for Ray, who's next. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, but thank you so much. And I hope you have a great weekend.
Of course. Thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks. Ray, are you there? Thank you for waiting patiently.
Sure I am. No, this is wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am excited to introduce you as the executive director of the Maine Cancer Foundation. And I'm going to launch right in because I want to cover some territory with you, but we don't have a ton of time. So how did you get to your role and what are you passionate about? You have a really interesting backstory.
yeah, I guess you could say so. 21 years old, graduated from St. Joe's and became a Portland police officer. And did that for a while, and that's what my dream was to be, is to be an officer in the community and in the biggest city in Maine. But then as I quickly realized, doing work in my community and trying to make connections in my beat, I fell in love with the nonprofits, doing such incredible proactive work like the Boys and Girls Club and the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and the Root Cellar, and I can go on. And so found myself giving a lot of my personal time, to do this proactive work, and then throwing a uniform on during my work time. And then I got to a point where I was like, I want to see if I could do this full time. And so I stepped away from a career that was on a pretty good track at the Portland Police Department, and went right into nonprofit work, and had a chance to lead the South Portland Boys and Girls Club for 4 years. And then the Ronald McDonald House in Portland for a couple of years. And then I was very intentional about my next step. I really wanted to serve the state in more communities and not necessarily the ones that I was living in. And so when the opportunity at Maine Cancer Foundation came to be this outreach manager, to go around the state to make sure people knew the work we were doing, the investments we were making, and build relationships, I was like, this has got to be it. You know, I want to serve all 16 counties. And so it's been 5 years. I've had a few different name tags in this building. And so, but recently became executive director in the fall.
And so are there any surprises for you that by becoming executive director and shifting roles, are there any particular surprises or lessons learned that you would share with this community?
Well, yeah, held a few different roles. People answer your emails a lot quicker now, which it's just silly to me, but it's amazing how.
What do you mean by that?
Well, your signature. People seem to respond quicker with a different title, which I find sometimes disappointing, but not surprising, I guess. But you know, I think because it's, you know, when you've been here and it's the same people doing the same work, you know, it's still the same people who answer the phone and do all those things. When you're an internal hire, you know, there's less surprises because you've kind of seen behind the curtain. I think what I was, you know, biggest surprise was how relieved people, I think, seem to be when sometimes there is somebody is hired who has been with the organization, who's, you know, we've heard from a few different people who've been connected and worked with the organization for a while, when they know what they're getting. And I think that was a sense of relief, I think, from a lot of partners and you know, in the community, which I was just so amazed by, which was really, really awesome and comforting.
And so how are things at the Cancer Foundation? What are your big projects, challenges? What's going on for you there?
Well, Maine's a big state, and our office is in Falmouth, and so it's you know, making sure we're getting around the state and connecting with partners. I always say that you know, we don't live and work in a lot of the communities that we help serve, so we rely on those partnerships and those people that do live there to tell us their needs and how we can support them. And so, but it's still important to show up and connect and be in person. So you know, Maine's a big state, and there's a lot of barriers, and they're different for different populations. And so how do we uniquely serve them the best through our ability? But big part of that is listening and learning from each community, but showing up, you know, in a time where it is easy just to pop on virtually, it's still important to get in your truck and drive around and connect with people. And so cancer is the #1 killer in our state. And that's not the case across the country always. And so it's a disease that has really impacted, I'm sure, everyone on this screen. And so it's something that we try to do, you know, as much work as possible to reduce, you know, the impact. And we're unique because we're a fundraising foundation. You know, foundation throws everyone off when they hear MCF. But we have to raise the funds in order to invest the funds each year.
Yeah,
So
right.
I see Try for a Cure has been plugged in there.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have something coming up soon, speaking
Yeah.
of fundraiser.
And I sat next to Kelly yesterday at a wonderful training, and you know, the Try is coming up in July, and that's a big part of our revenue that we then put back in the community. And so, and all of it stays here in the state, and we just try incredibly hard. You know, Caitlin Michaud's on here as our director of programming to make sure we're investing these funds all across the state. And that is a huge priority for us.
I'm really excited that you are bringing your leadership skills. It's really great. You do have a unique story as having come at this work from a different place than a lot of people. And so for me, it's really helpful in telling the story about how everybody ultimately relates to the work in the nonprofit sector, no matter where you start from. And so I'm really grateful that you've decided to commit to the nonprofit sector in that way. And I wish you guys a tremendously successful Try for a Cure. I just would love to wrap up. Did you think of a book or anything that you're reading these days that you might be willing to share?
I have 2 daughters, a 6- and 4-year-old, Eloise and Adeline. And so I do a lot of reading to them. So it's usually their choice each night. And it's usually always ends with one more. But so it's a lot of kids' books at the moment. But I am chipping away at a book called Living with Mr. Fahrenheit, which has to do with a former Portland police officer and retired chief of police, and her husband, and the mental health crisis that he's gone through PTSD and dealing with that. And so it's a local author, so trying to support. But it's been intriguing how reading this and trying to support her and this awesome, and being connected to this family, it's really brought out a lot of things I've forgotten. Maybe I've kind of buried down deep from my days as being an officer that I thought I'd packed away nicely. So it's kind of been kind of strange in my own little journey, kind of going through it. So it's been really, really great just thinking about first responders and what they kind of go through, and being considerate of how that stacks up over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you, Ray, for taking the time, and I hope you have a great weekend. And I'm sorry, everybody, but it is 9:47, which is late for me. So thank you all for being here. And I hope you're as inspired by all these leaders in our community that are obviously committing so much time and energy and talent to improving our communities. So thank you all. Have a great weekend. Our next MANP Connects is July 21st. Don't forget to put it on your calendar. You'll hear from us. And thanks again to Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. Have a great weekend. Take care. Bye.